present for you a positive argument for theism, and I want you to do your bestest to tear it to pieces.
Meet the prodigy. The prodigy is a panentheist. Panentheism is differentiated from pantheism in that pantheism posits that everything in existence is in its totality the essence of God, whereas panentheism posits that the universe exists as part of God. It's semantic philosophical masturbation. It's distinctions without differences. It all comes down to theoretic concepts of the nature of existence, but in no way extends characteristics to God which are worthy of worship. It's a form of postmodern cargo cultism. But let's allow the prodigy to make his case.
As I'm trying to build the biggest picture of reality as I can, and describe it in the most accurate way I possibly can, and make the least amount of assumptions I possibly can. The best foundation for any worldview is to start with what we know to be absolutely true. The statement, "I exist," is absolutely true. And what this thing is, this I that exists, is it my body? When you think about the brain in the jar thought experiment, you soon realize that you don't really know that your body even exists. Some, like HD for example, have said I am my thoughts. I cannot be my thoughts because I am aware of my thoughts. The best definition for this I that exists is awareness itself. Awareness itself is not physical. You cannot have proof for the actual existence of objective reality. At this point in the progression, they seem to make a group of huge assumptions. There exists a world of material objects. An assumption. Statements about these objects can be known to be true through sense experience. Assumption. These objects exist not only when they are being perceived, but also when they are not perceived. The objects of perception are largely perception independent. Assumption. These objects are also able to retain properties of the types we perceive them as having, even when they are not being perceived. Their properties are perception independent. Assumption. And also, this is a big one, by means of our senses alone, we perceive the world directly and pretty much as it is. In the main, our claims of knowledge about it are justified. Assumption. So, the general conclusion is that in quantum theory, naive realism, although necessary at the level of observations, fails at the microscopic level. Here's what really gets me though. Atheists make this humongous assumption that the material universe is real. And then they go so far as to say that the material universe is the only thing that is real. What we need to do now is describe or find the best description for what this is that awareness is aware of. Space-time does not claim existence on its own, but only as a structural quality of the field. The zero-point field, defined as the vacuum state, also called the vacuum, is the quantum state with the lowest possible energy. Generally, it contains no physical particles. However, it is by no means a simple empty space. According to quantum mechanics, the vacuum state is not truly empty, but instead contains a vibration. And these vibrations are able to make certain frequency patterns form. Energy vibrates at frequencies, and our sensory organs receive these frequencies, extract the information in the form of binary ones and zeros, send the information along to the brain in the form of electrical signals. Our brain processes the information and a movie forms for us to watch. We not only see it and hear it, we also taste it, smell it, and feel it. But the important thing is that we have discovered that by making the least amount of assumption, we can say that at the most basic level, the perceived reality we experience is just information. Information is non-physical. there exist only two things: awareness and then information. When these two things interact, what we get is experience. So my theory is, in the broadest scope, the biggest picture, and making the least amount of assumptions, we have only these two things. When we understand that these two things aren't really two things, but two parts of one eternal system, we have found God. What we have discovered is God that experiences itself through us.
This is not an argument for theism, since it in absolutely no way is theistic. It is by default atheistic. Otherwise, terms have no meaning, and we all have unique philosophies, and discourse is useless. To be an argument for theism, it would have to be an argument for a being which has theistic qualities. Most atheists acknowledge that something unknown is responsible for existence, but even if that thing is math, which your argument is, then that thing has no desire to be worshipped nor need of us. Ergo, it is not God. Also, Prodigy, you slightly mischaracterize the atheistic position. It's not that we argue the material world is all that exists. We argue that non-material things cannot interact with material things. There's a difference. In fact, your whole argument supports materialism if you think about it. You argue that the material world breaks down to simple frequencies of vibration at the quantum level, and that this vibration is the means of conveying information to create the illusion of our material world. What you're ignoring is that this vibration also is the material world. Atoms, electrons, quarks, all of it break down to vibrations of pure non-physical energy. Frankly, I'm willing to grant you every point except that this interaction you describe is God. Furthermore, you insist that we are awareness, while overlooking the obvious fact that our awareness is an emergent property of existence. In fact, the universe existed for billions of years before we ever became aware. Even if the entire cosmos ultimately breaks down to vibrations and the creation of information conveyed through frequency, it in some sense existed anterior to awareness of that existence. Besides, it in no way offers explanations to the origin of God. Let's suppose for a moment that Pantheism is correct, and God exists as a concept outside of time-space and the vibration of energy as you have hypothesized. What does this tell us of the nature of this God? Is it math? Is it physics? Is it itself an emergent quality of nothingness? And how is panentheism, as you describe it, preferential to, say, scientific deism? In fact, I would call scientific deism preferable to panentheism because at least it attempts to pinpoint why there is something rather than nothing. Even your point that there can't be nothing as there will always be vibration fails to address the central philosophical question. Briefly, scientific deism says that nothingness has the property of being a concept, and having property is not nothingness. However, before we existed to conceive it, it still did not exist as actual nothingness because it was a concept of math and was self-referential as a circle is self-referential. Ergo, nothingness is not void and has property, and in a sense has dimensionality, which if curved on itself becomes circular and therefore can emanate all other dimensionality. So nothingness references itself, is therefore consciousness, and is therefore God. Yet calling nothingness a concept and arguing that concepts need minds to be conceived is just more mental masturbation. Additionally, even if we grant every claim of scientific deism, nominally deifying a necessary quality of the universe does not raise that concept or that quality to the properties needed for godliness, specifically the worthiness of worship. Ergo, it is still atheistic. So whether you worship your idea of God or not, you call it God. But why call a non-sentient, impersonal, unthinking, essential quality of math God? It's like calling pi God. Ultimately, it's goalpost shifting for its own sake. When the definition of God is shown to be incorrect, then the concept of God is proven false. When the concept of the ether was shown incorrect, we didn't simply rename space-time the ether. All atheism says is that the theistic concept of God is rejected by the individual. It says nothing else about the individual's worldview. And your worldview is based on little more than an incomplete hypothesis. The idea of God evolved with our capacity to think in the abstract, and it never gets validity simply because it can be conceived of. It's not theology, that's sophistry. Theism always relies on claims of revelation, be it Vedic, Quranic, Biblical, or the Book of Mormon, or any other religious revelation. But deism and panentheism rely on philosophical solipsism. Bottom line, there's no reason to call a concept God, even if it ultimately turns out to be the correct model. The idea of God was born in the human mind. It is not a necessary quality of the universe. The proper way to invalidate atheism is to prove that there is a supernatural realm, that God is necessary, or that God exists. Undermining materialism may undermine some atheism, but not mine. And frankly, I don't even think you successfully managed to do that. Thank you.
And I want you to do your bestest to tear it to pieces.